Let's talk about Vulkan of the 18th Legion, the Salamanders. He landed on the world of Nocturne, classified as one of the Death Worlds. Rich in mineral wealth, such as gemstones and precious metals, but full of magma, radiation, and monstrous predators. When the planet's moon, Prometheus, is in its closest orbit, the land is riven with tempests, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions, and the great beasts awaken from their slumber. What made it even worse was the monsters known as Dusk Wraiths. In fact, these were none other than Drukhari, who invaded Nocturne for their slave supply. The world hardened its people. They became resistant to extreme climate, gravity, and radiation, yet retained considerable genetic stability. Although their technological level had regressed during the Age of Strife, the Nocturnians maintained a sophisticated and harmonic culture. Their courage and perseverance were especially potent. Vulkan was adopted by a blacksmith. He later worked in his father's forge and embraced the culture that brought him up. He took care of the vicious monsters that threatened his people and drove the Drukhari away. Naturally, he became the most renowned hero of the world. Vulkan could have taken control of the world by force. The Nocturnians even offered him a coronation. But for him, power for its own sake was a hollow trinket. Later, he was found and visited by the Emperor. After testing the Primarch with Nocturne's own ritual trials, he revealed his true identity and ordered him to join the Great Crusade. Vulkan said he couldn't leave his people undefended, so the Emperor assured him the 18th would protect the world from now on. Then the Primarch left with his father. After that, he spent several years alongside the Emperor, learning the arts of war, history, and science. He also studied the weapon forges of Mars and his brother Primarch. The 18th at that time was one of the more veiled legions for some reason. Their first official battle took place in the closing days of the Unification Wars. They lost about 95% of their numbers, but achieved victory against impossible odds. Fortunately, they were provided with new waves of recruits and rebuilt rapidly. However, the Great Crusade started during this recovery phase, so they couldn't join the initial expeditionary fleets. So after they recovered, the 18th was divided and assigned across many different places. Being split up, they were usually outnumbered, so their favorite way of warfare was leading enemies into a confined area and destroying them with short-ranged yet deadly weaponry, though their hot temper probably affected these preferences. Unlike their cousins, the 18th's battlefields were far from the front lines. Their battlefields were space hulks, alien pirate raids, or newly found dangers in human settlements that were sudden and deadly enough to call in space marines, but too far from other legions' fronts. The 18th answered such calls, disregarding the odds. They didn't care about casualties. They went a bit too far with this and chose not to retreat, even when retreating was the optimal choice. The 18th was praised as saviors, but also viewed as almost suicidal in their temper, so their reputation drastically differed from person to person. Due to such attritions, their numbers never reached the normal full strength accorded by the Emperor. In fact, whether the Legion would survive at all was a matter of open debate. One day, orcs invaded human colonies far from the front lines. As usual, other legions were unavailable, so the 19,000 Marines from the 18th were deployed. They marshaled the local defenders and held out against over 1 million orcs for nearly a year. Thanks to them, 3 entire planetary populations could evacuate. The 18th suffered heavy losses and even lost their commander, but they still held their ground and drew the orcs to them. The 18th knew no one would come to rescue them, but they kept fighting and destroying the orcs' fleets to save as many lives as possible. However, they were surprised by unexpected reinforcements. With 3,000 legionaries from Nocturne came Vulkan. As the Primarch devastated the orc fleets, the 18th on the ground regrouped and turned to the offensive, butchering the shattered orcs. After the battle, the two forces met. They removed their helmets to greet each other and immediately recognized their Gene father. The survivors of the Terran 18th knelt before their Primarch, but Vulkan bid them rise. Instead, in honor of the lives they had saved and the price they had paid, he knelt before his sons. With Vulkan in command, the 18th was first ordered to gather at Prometheus, Nocturne's moon. The Primarch showed them a powerful stronghold that became their headquarters and armory. Vulkan also personally built a dreadnought for the fallen commander. He also declared that Nocturne would be their primary source of recruits and reforged his legion, both physically and spiritually. Vulkan aimed to keep the legion's spirit of valor and self-sacrifice, but calm their temper and make them fight wisely. For this, he assimilated what he had learnt from the Emperor and the Nocturnian culture. So he taught his sons that Marines exist to protect and liberate humanity, and that each of them was a weapon forged to this end. This teaching is called the Promethean cult. The cult provided a common goal and unified the Legion. The 18th took their name from the greatest predator of Nocturne and became known as the Salamanders. The Salamanders were reorganized into 7 realms. There are 7 great city settlements on Nocturne, and each realm is linked to one of these cities. Protecting their city is a realm's sworn duty. This is why the commander of a realm is called a protector. The Salamanders get along with the citizens they protect. Also, their new recruits come from these cities, creating a strong bond of kinship and loyalty within each company. Recruiting almost exclusively from Nocturne had a downside, of course. The Salamanders are not as numerous, unlike some larger legions, but at least all Nocturnians are hardened survivors, so their rate of marine implant rejection is very low. One of the iconic features of the Salamanders is their appearance. They have obsidian-colored skin and bioluminescent red eyes, which was noticeable even in the first Terran members of the Legion. This is how they earned the title of the Devils from the Dark. Nocturne's extreme environment made this trait even more significant, with every salamander undergoing this transformation, creating a sense of shared nature and identity within the Legion. After some years of reformation, the Salamanders departed from Nocturne and joined their cousins on the front lines, where they smashed alien empires and brought many worlds into compliance. The 18th was now disciplined and self-controlled. This, plus the Primarch's virtuous character, affected their reputation, and the Salamanders soon became one of the most trustworthy legions. Did you like the lore comic? It was made by the talented Dong Gool Troll, and I'll leave his links in the description. I've always been a fan of the Salamanders, who are probably the closest to good guy hero space marines the setting has. As always, if you did enjoy the video, please give it a like, and consider subscribing to our little channel to become a member of our ever-growing imperium of subscribers. Thank you and goodbye, until our next adventure.